Good afternoon. I am Nicole Turner-Lee. I'm a fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., and I work on issues related to digital inclusion as well as artificial intelligence, particularly algorithmic bias. And before I jump to my first slide, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself and who the internet thinks that I am. I'm an African-American woman, obviously, which I think the internet has sort of come up with that suggestion. I'm a woman that likes tan shoes, and I think through my purchasing, the internet has picked that up. I have children, which again, I think the internet has picked up through the purchases that I've made. And I do like to shop a lot, which the internet has probably also picked up. But when they've placed that all together, they've also figured out that I come from a group of people that have been challenged by inequality in this country and experience a wealth gap. So in many respects, I have become that person that the internet has made me to be. But now I'm subjected to predatory lending. I may be denied credit. I may be denied employment. I may have other decisions foreclosed on me just because of who the internet thinks that I am. The topic of my talk in this next few minutes is around algorithmic bias and how we're actually seeing algorithms and algorithmic bias manifest in many of the new AI systems, some of which we're talking about at this conference, which are voice activated. The ecology in which we are in now consists of algorithms, which are a set of functions designed to perform repetitive tasks, artificial intelligence, which are systems powered by those algorithms, machine learning, which is the automation of these repetitive tasks, just another fancier way of taking us to the next level of algorithmic decision making, and deep learning, which some of us may be familiar with. My people were actually exploited during the 2016 election as a result of deep learning technologies and the manipulation of images. When we look at this new ecology, and I go back to who I am or who the internet thinks I am, this web of my digital composite profile has now led to a more simplified view of who I am as a consumer. And even though the design by engineers, I'm a sociologist by trade, is pretty simple. We have design metrics when it comes to machine learning. We have training data, which actually helps the machine learn the variety of repetitive tasks that we're trying to actually insert into the model, and we have results. So let me stay on this slide and just go back to, again, to who I am. If the algorithm or the machine learning model is designed to market a particular product or service to me, let's say a credit product, but historically, the training data from which it is actually working from assumes that African Americans are least likely to have sustainable credit, least likely to have wealth or assets. That model will be trained and skewed disproportionately in that effect. And as a result, again, going back to who I am, I may be marketed products and services that are predatory. And as a result, I'll suffer an unintended consequence from the benefits of this new digital ecology. Bias, which I have defined in a variety of papers that I've written at Brookings, is really inferences about data about people, including their identities, their demographic attributes, their preferences, and their likely future behaviors or predictive analytics that is sort of assumed will create a pattern of trends. In our paper, we define bias in algorithms when you have two similarly situated people that have different results. And consequently, you have a point of view of discrimination. So what starts out as a criminal justice algorithm that's actually designed to help judges make better determinations around bail and sentencing, because if I go back to this particular slide around training data, African American men are disproportionately represented in the training data because the criminal justice system is skewed. They're more likely to find themselves imprisoned and incarcerated or detained, according to the Compass algorithm, to suffer an unintended consequence that is not just, not fair, and in many cases, unethical. Moving forward, for the point of my talk, and I talk around the country on this issue, as a sociologist, many people ask me, why are you interested in this? And I'm simply interested because we've come too far in developing systems of equality to have the internet become a system of inequality and to foster and to amplify those stereotypes. Even in voice-activated technologies, there are examples where people who speak with an ethnic or foreign accent cannot be understood simply, again, because the design and the data used to train that algorithm or train that technology is not inclusive. So going forward, how do we have AI serve ethical values? This model that I proposed, it actually gives me a seat at the table as a social scientist. Developers, social scientists, lawyers, and ethicists need to come together when developing responsible and ethical AI. That's the first thing. Having collaborative models not only ensures that you're developing something that does not have blind spots around, again, going back to me as an African-American woman who just wants to buy tan shoes, that I'm actually surveilled, profiled, or targeted in terms of the micro-advertising space for things that I am not. Secondly, this model assumes that as we ubiquitously deploy technology, that we're co-evolving values and norms that juxtapose science against society. Science by itself is not neutral. Math is not neutral. As much as we like to say the scientific discovery of something that is discrete, that can be defined through numerical equations, actually creates equity and fairness, it doesn't. Because in this ocean and sea of voluminous information, there are inferential assumptions about who we are that new artificial intelligence and autonomous systems have picked up. And for those of us sitting at this conference, what implications does that have if we're developing tools that lack inclusivity, but in many ways perpetuate discrimination and amplify stereotypes? Think about it. In voice-activated technologies, will my voice suggest the type of person I am, despite the internet not necessarily gathering, much like a census, my demographic attributes? Will my genre of music identify or push out content that the internet believes that I actually am interested in? This prioritization of the algorithmic economy, it has good points. Don't get me wrong. It's helping to solve issues of climate change. It's helping us to make better decisions around healthcare. We're able to cater educational content in much better ways to service young people who have a need for special resources. But left unchecked, it has a potential to do and be just who we are, fallible human beings. I always tell people when I give these talks, computers don't wake up one day and say, I'm biased. It's the people around the ecology that input their values, their stereotypes, and oftentimes their misunderstandings into the design and the data used to train these systems. And so let me go back as I close up on who I said I was. I'm a sociologist who knows nothing about engineering. I'm a consumer who doesn't often think that my decisions have consequence. And I'm a person who cares about equity and justice that will continue to find ways that the technology space does not become weaponized against people of color. I've suggested in Washington, D.C., how do we solve this? Maybe one way to start is to ensure that anti-discrimination laws and civil rights laws are actually applied so that developers have a landing point from which to develop and audit products and services. We've seen countless examples so far where products and services have served to be discriminatory simply because the young developer didn't know the history behind what inputs and labels and features should be part of the algorithm's design. That's the first thing. The second thing, in order to not stifle innovation, can we create agreements and partnerships between developers like yourselves and legislators for safe harbors or sandboxes where we want to promote anti-bias experimentation? Right now, we're seeing a lot of Post-it notes thrown at the wall, but very few companies and very few developers are doing a bias impact statement before a product goes to market. I'm sorry. Going back to myself, permissionless forgiveness doesn't work anymore, particularly if I'm denied credit or I'm incarcerated longer or more people who look like me suffer those same effects and consequences. We need to have, as we have this conversation at the summit, many more substantial conversations on how to quell and remedy bias. At Brookings, I'm working on this, looking at, do we declare human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights from the UN, as one of those guardrails? Do we look at laws and policies? But I think the most important starting place for most of us is ourselves. What do we bring to the table as a developer? What do we bring as a consumer? And how do we coalesce these worlds to make a better product? Unfortunately, I speak for those where opportunities which are foreclosed due to the laziness of the internet have no other recourse to remedy that. And so as we look at the evolution of these technologies, as I close, what are you going to do to check your biases at the door? How are we going to move into a framework where we actually desire human values with the expectation of creating more responsible and more effective and more inclusive technology? Where are you in that? And I know I look at myself every day, and even though I try to recurate that algorithm, at least I'm conscious that what's below the surface may be what's assumed about me, which is why I'm here today. I'll end there. Thank you. You can find me at Dr. Turner Lee at brookings.edu, on email, or on Twitter at Dr. Turner Lee. And again, thank you. We're talking a lot about this at Brookings moving forward, and we're talking about this globally. So let's keep this conversation of bias inserted into these mainstream conversations.